now. Who's beating who? This is so-called cop. Okay, can you see a badge? No. Okay, no, none of them. They're refusing to give any identification? That is correct. There's probably 15 of them. About 15? That's correct. They're beating the out of my friend. This is ridiculous. They're kicking him too. They're beating the out of my friend.
In the summer of 2020, the United States saw massive social unrest after the release of a video showing the death of George Floyd while being arrested by Minneapolis police officers. It was not the first case of alleged police brutality in America, but it sealed the critical role that cell phone cameras have played in not only bringing the topic of social justice to light, but also bringing important evidence into court. But that was not the case back in 2004. When a man named Frank Jude was detained and tortured by a group of Milwaukee police officers.
At that time in 2004, Milwaukee had changed over the years from being more of a manufacturing city. A lot of jobs had left in the late 80s, mid 80s, and so they were looking for an identity. Like a lot of cities in the upper Midwest, you know, racism and segregation is a big issue here. By certain measurements, Milwaukee's the worst place to live in the country for African Americans.
Several off-duty officers beat Jude at a house party in Bayview, accusing Jude of stealing a police badge that was never found.
Milwaukee, for a long time, has had a not very good reputation on race relations. It is still today, well into the 21st century, the most racially segregated city in the United States, or nearly that.
I seen him when they threw him into like a paddy wagon and everything, and they stuck the pen in his ear and everything.
Zerwinski remembers two of the officers, John Bartlett and Andrew Spangler, angry.
They had his hands like this, and they were all beating him up.
At that time in 2004, I was the police reporter. I'm covering the police beat, and I get a tip from a source saying, John, I think some of my officers are going to go to prison for this. And so it was clear early on that this was going to be something significant.
May help you?
Yes, my name is Linda Chapman. I just received a call from my daughter, Kirsten Antonison. She and some friends are on the corner of Ellen and Rusk, R-U-S-K, and something terrible is going on there.
My name is Kirsten Antonison, and I was a witness to the beating of Frank Jude back in 2004. I went to a bachelorette party, and Frank Jude arrived as a stripper for the bachelorette party and came with a friend, Lavelle Harris, who brought in his equipment to do the performance. I had a friend who invited us to the party at Andrew Spangler's house, and I just knew that he was a police officer, and my friend from high school was dating him.
Andy Spangler was a police officer who had been on the police department for a number of years at this point, and he had just rented an apartment in Bayview. So he has this apartment moving in party. But it's not just this night. This incident happens on Saturday night into Sunday morning, but this party, by several accounts, had been going on for days. This is mostly off-duty police officers, mostly white. And I think it's important to remember that when police officers get together, they tend to kind of just be their own group. They're insular, especially when they're drinking and so forth.
It's a tough job. Nobody's going to say otherwise, and it can be dangerous, and nobody's going to say otherwise. And bonds come out of that. Bonds with, understandably, you want to protect people that are similarly situated. And that desire to protect can be healthy or it can be unhealthy. And it becomes unhealthy when you decide to protect a fellow officer at the expense of a citizen. The injuries in this case are very serious, and I will cut right to the heart of the matter. Mr. Jude will testify that this is his picture a year or so before the events of October 24 of 2004. A doctor will testify that this picture accurately depicts what Mr. Jude looked like when he was conveyed from the Spangler residence to St. Francis Hospital.
When we were walking out of the bar, we ran into Frank and Lavelle, and we invited them to go with us to the party in Bayview.
The evidence is going to describe a scene of chaos, and you are going to hear out of that chaos much conflicting evidence and testimony. The evidence is going to show, and there is no dispute, that Frank Jude sustained injuries that he should not have sustained. What we are here for today, and what we have to decide, is not only who done it, but whether in this particular case, the individual I represent, Daniel Masaryk, was involved in causing these injuries. That's the focus. I do want you to know that Daniel Masaryk is going to get on this witness stand and he's going to testify. And he's going to tell you that he never touched Frank Jude that night.
Violence directed at unarmed, often, not always, but often, people of color, and a kind of pack behavior with unfortunate recurrence by the Milwaukee Police Department.
What race are you, sir?
I'm African American and Caucasian.
Did all four of you go into the house?
Yes, sir.
All right, what did you see when you got in the house?
I seen a lot of men. I see a lot of eyes on me and Lavelle, and I was nervous and I was uptight, and I asked Kristen, I said, are these people racist?
They're beating the out of him right now. Who's beating who? This so-called pap.
On the night of October 23rd, 2004, Frank Jude and Lavelle Harris were on their way to a party at the home of Andrew Spangler, a Milwaukee police officer. They'd been invited by two new friends named Kirsten Antoneson and Katie Brown. But when they got there, it was immediately obvious they weren't welcome.
What happened at or about 2:30, 2:40 a.m. that morning that drew your attention?
A female, followed by two males, walked in to the house that didn't appear to be invited.
How do you know if a person is not invited? Let us know how you felt they weren't. You knew that they weren't invited.
They were the only people that entered the house that after I was there that I didn't know, that I was sure weren't police officers.
Frank is African American and Lavelle is African American. It's also true that there's mostly white people, overwhelmingly white. So they're sort of sizing the situation up. And these guys were under their, sort of eyes right away.
Did you have any discussion with Tina at that time, if you recollect?
Yes. I asked her where the bathroom was because Katie and I had to use the bathroom.
We went and used the bathroom, and Frank and Lavelle stood by the bathroom when we went in.
And how long were they gone?
I stayed a couple minutes. It wasn't long, really much.
Did you have any contact with anybody during that time?
Yes, I ran into Andrew Spangler.
And do you see him here in the court today?
He's sitting right there with the yellow tie, black suit. He asked me who I knew. I said, I know that girl Tina with the dark hair, and she waved at me. But some men from the kitchen came behind Andrew Spangler and basically looked at me crazy and sticking their chests out like they're bigger than me or they're better than me or I don't know what. But I had a bad vibe, and I felt like I wasn't welcome there, and felt like I should leave as soon as possible.
How close to you did they get? Right up in your face?
Right in my face.
What about Mr. Jude? Did they get close to him?
Yes, sir.
Are either of the people that came up to you and said those things to you present in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir.
Where do you see any of those persons?
Right there in the brown suit with the stripy tie, and right there with the bald head with the blue shirt on.
May the record reflect the identification of Defendant Bartlett and Defendant Spangler.
Right after Katie and I came out of the bathroom, Frank came over to me and asked if I knew the people at the party. And I told him I did not. And he indicated that somebody had said something racist or questionable to him. And When he told me that, I said, okay, then let's get out of here because that's not my scene.
The decision was made to leave. Did you do it immediately or did you wait a while?
Immediately.
So you never sat down in the house?
No, sir.
Did you observe either of the young ladies have a beverage in the house?
No, sir.
There was nothing that he did that was extraordinary. He didn't call attention to himself. He didn't act out in any unpalatable way. He was accused later on of taking the badge. But before that, there wasn't anyone that said he was agitating or causing a disturbance or doing anything of an offensive nature.
Frank had approached me and said something had went on, and now there's people coming towards us. So I said to Frank and Lavelle, get in my truck, let's get out of here, we'll come back for your car.
In other words, you were concerned for their safety?
Yes.
Once we went outside, we went directly to the girl's truck that was parked across the street.
Now, why did you do that?
I felt uneasy. You know, it's like they was aggressive, so I stayed close to the girls for protection, and just in case if something happened, they could be a witness.
Officer Spengler claimed that his badge was missing. A group of these officers sprung into action, for lack of a better way to put it, and in a group of 10 plus strong went out to the car and confronted Frank and Lavelle.
Was a plan made quickly there to do that, or what was decided on, and who decided it, and were you part of it?
Yeah, I had decided, I don't know what other people decided, but I had decided that we had to find out if they had taken the badge.
Now, did there come a time when you realized that there was some type of commotion or something occurring at this party?
Correct.
All right. What did you see?
Well, I had happened upon everybody exiting the residence.
Do you talk to them?
Yes, I do.
And what's the nature of that conversation?
I asked Mr. Spengler what's going on, what's the commotion, and he said that his badge had been stolen and advised me to check to make sure that my things were still in my room. We both go into the house, and I go into my room to verify my belongings are still there.
At some point, do you then leave the room?
I do.
Okay, and where do you go?
Well, I go back past Andrew Spengler's room because I didn't locate my memo book, and your memo book contains any information that you had pertaining to work of the police department, any people that you've talked to, reports taken, anything that you may need to refer to. So it's an important piece of material that you need to protect and keep. And I didn't locate that, so I proceeded back out the front door.
I look up at the house and there's people filing out of the house in almost single file. They came down the stairs, there was a porch, they wrapped onto the porch, and they just kept coming out of the house right after us.
The house has a porch, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you saw men standing on that porch?
Yes, I did.
And where were they looking?
Looking towards the truck, looking at us.
What happened then?
Oh, they all came down the steps, circled the truck. A man put his arm around the tire, on the driver's side tire, and saying, "We're the police, get out the truck, someone stole the badge."
The man was behind you with one hand holding your collar and the other hand near your ear?
He is holding a knife.
Did the knife ever come any closer?
He cut me on my face very slowly.
After attempting to leave a house party attended mostly by off-duty Milwaukee police officers, Frank Jude and his friends Lavelle Harris, Kirsten Antoneson, and Katie Brown were all detained. It seemed the host of the party, Andrew Spengler, was missing his police badge, and the guests were all accusing Frank and Lavelle of stealing it. A bad situation was made far worse with the surplus alcohol and toxic anger that was flooding that scene. And within minutes, things got violent.
I observed a crowd in the street. I heard a lot of yelling.
Angry yelling?
It was, yes, it was loud and appeared angry. I can't discern anything immediately, but then I hear somebody yelling, "Where's the badge? Where's the badge?" repeatedly.
There were people at 3 corners of my truck. I remember there was a man at the front passenger side, and there was also people at the front driver's side, and then all along the whole driver's side to the back of the truck.
They surrounded the car and started yelling to shut off the truck.
What did you do or say?
I said, if there's a problem here, we can call the police.
And what was said at that time?
They are the police. I don't need to call the police.
When you say they are the police, did they say we are the police? Or
Yes.
I got out of the truck based on their instruction to get out. Knowing at this point they had told me they were cops, I abided and exited the truck. I was escorted to the back of my truck and told to put my hands on the tailgate. I look back at the front of the vehicle and I see people pulling Frank out of my truck.
They're pulled out of the truck. They're not voluntarily coming out of the truck. They pull out of the truck. They're separated. Frank is separated from Lavelle.
What happened then?
A couple men grabbed me out the truck. I can't remember who it was, but they grabbed me, whatever they can grab me, dragged me out the truck.
Right. And what did they do or say at that point?
Where's the badge, they said. And I said, I don't have no badge. You can search me. They searched me. They pat searched me. It was nothing there. They checked the girls' purses. The girls volunteered to have the purses checked. I wasn't sure where it was Lavelle at the time.
I think you said that you ran into Mr. Spangler. Where did you physically run into Mr. Spangler at this point?
Down on the sidewalk in front of his house between the landing and the sidewalk.
Right. What conversation did you have with Mr. Spangler at that point?
At that point, I asked Mr. Spangler if he had moved my memo book or not.
Right. You're out talking to Mrs. Spangler, and what, if anything, do you do at that point?
I go back into my room and locate it.
There is commotion going on. Bartlett is yelling. A theft has occurred. Your good friend Packard is out there in the street where the commotion is going on, and your first concern is your memo book.
That is what I did. That was my concern.
I never saw what happened to Lavelle. Katie was the first out of the truck. I was the second, and I saw Frank get pulled out. I have no idea what happened to Lavelle.
So what did you do?
I realized again at that point that we needed to separate them. So we took Lavelle Harris and we walked north approximately 2 car lengths. And then I asked for Lavelle Harris to sit on the curb.
And as you sat cross-legged on the curb, the man was behind you with one hand holding your collar and the other hand near your ear?
Yes, holding a knife.
With a knife in that hand?
Yes, sir.
What next happened?
Start saying, you think you pretty, you gonna die tonight, who the you think you is? And he told me to stand up, let me stick this knife in your ass. Stand up, bend over, let me stick this knife in your ass.
Did the knife ever come any closer?
He cut me with the knife.
Where on your person did he cut you?
He cut me on my face, very slowly.
Is there a scar there now?
Yes, sir. The man cut me with a knife on my face.
I just heard a scream from, I believe it was Lavelle Harris on the other side of the truck.
Right. After you heard the scream that you thought was from Lavelle, what happened?
I just heard a white individual man saying Lavelle, Lavelle, the took off.
He used his name, Lavelle?
He didn't say Lavelle, but the took off.
Harris was moved over to a sidewalk and sit down on a curb and was able to make an escape. So he ran. He was not subjected. He was cut, but he was not subjected to the degree of force to which Jude was.
Something happens that causes you to take some action touching Mr. Jude, right?
Correct. At that point, he was really balling his fists up, and he actually raised his arms into what's considered a boxer's stance, and he actually threw a punch.
And did he hit anyone?
He did not.
What did you do as a result of that?
As he was throwing that punch, I went to grab his arm to keep him from punching any further.
Would you describe the fashion in which Mr. Bartlett grabbed Mr. Jude from behind?
From behind, over the shoulder, across the chest.
Would you describe that as being in a headlock?
No, I wouldn't say it was a headlock.
He was being restrained against his will. And when I say against his will, I did not see him fighting back, but he was in a type of headlock. There were a swarm of people around him, yelling, shouting things at him. I didn't see any kind of fighting back, anything like that.
What happened after that?
A lot of blows to the head. I'm begging, crying, asking, please stop,
Can you establish a particular order in which these events occurred? If you can. If you can't.
I believe that the knife went to the neck. Where's the badge? I kill you.
You were on one side of Jude, Packard was on the other side of Jude, and both of you started punching him.
It's the middle of the night, October 24th, and Frank Jude and his 3 friends are trapped. A hostile group of off-duty police officers have accused him of stealing one of their badges at a house party where Frank's group became instantly unwelcome. They set upon Frank and began violently beating him, trying, without proof, to extract a confession out of him in the most brutal way they could.
At that time, I saw kicks going to Frank's head. I saw punches in his back. I believe he was on his stomach at that time. Numerous kicks to the head.
The beating was the most horrific thing I've witnessed in my entire life. I had a hard time watching, but I wanted to make sure that I kept my eye on him because I didn't understand what was happening.
At some point, did this confrontation become physical?
Yes.
Will you tell the jury, please, what happened, what you saw, and who did what?
Officer Packard was on one side, and Mr. Masaryk was on the other side, and a physical altercation ensued at that point.
Do you know Jody Kammermayer?
Yes.
I want to refresh your recollection. She appeared in this courtroom yesterday. She said you were standing by Jude on one side, Masaryk on the other, and she saw you punching, you and Masaryk punching Mr. Jude at that time. Does that refresh your recollection at all about what happened at this time?
No, that's not what happened.
So you left Packard out there and Bartlett yelling, and you say you went for your memo book. Is that right?
That is what I did.
You heard the testimony of Jody Kammermayer that at that time said you were on one side of Jude, Packard was on the other side of Jude, and both of you started punching him. You heard that testimony, didn't you?
I did, sir.
Were you there?
No, sir.
With Packard, your friend, punching Jude at that time when the trouble started?
No, sir.
You were in looking for your memo book, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
It aroused suspicion early on, the gravity of the injuries, and then the question of who's being candid and who isn't and so on. So there are many cases where through the years of complaints against police, this was an extraordinary one.
In any police department, there is a strong sense of commitment to each other. And I think the question is, where do those loyalties lie when there are allegations of misconduct?
When he gets down on the ground, you're on his left side, Packard's on his right side. Tell us what you do.
At that point, I was concerned that there could be a weapon of some sort that he was trying to access, and I punched Mr. Jude on his left side in his rib area probably 4 or 5 times.
You're not denying, just so the jury understands, when you say I didn't see any kicks or punches or blows, you're not denying that they occurred, are you?
No.
Katie Brown, the very lady you're standing with, says she looked and saw punches, saw Spengler punch Mr. Jude, saw Bartlett there and saw Masaryk there.
Okay,
She's right there, same place you are. You're standing right with her. You didn't see that, you're saying?
No, I did not.
From where I was standing, I could see blood, I could hear kicks and punches. Even at one point, I remember hearing cracks. When I think he was getting hit in the head region, it was horrific.
Did you see him resisting in any fashion?
Not at all.
Did you see whether he was turning or rolling to try to protect himself from being kicked?
I saw no movement from him at all.
He was not armed, was he? You didn't find a gun, you didn't find a knife, you didn't find a badge, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. At this point, then, you leave Mr. Jude, is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you satisfied that he doesn't pose a danger anymore?
At that point, it didn't seem that he posed an immediate threat.
I did call my mom first because I didn't know who else to call, because who do you call when it is the police? Like, who's next? So I called my mom first.
And did you have your cell phone?
Yes, I did.
No one had taken the cell phone up to that point, is that
No.
correct? Right. And you told your mother to do what? To call the police or
Call
what?
the police.
And what happened at that point?
Hits coming from different directions, but somebody spread my legs open and cut my pants or ripped my pants, either or, I'm not sure. But I felt the knife between my legs to my anus.
Where were you when this was happening? I mean, were you on the ground or?
I was on the ground. I believe I was laying up. I was on the ground.
Do you recognize those pants?
Yes, sir.
And what do you recognize them from?
That night, I was wearing these pants when I was going to my shows and to Andrew Spangler's house. I was losing my breath. I was fainting out, and I was fainting out at the time. And all I was thinking was my little daughter, because she was just born, and I thought I was going to die right there.
I did end up calling 911 after I hung up with my mother, and I reported what was happening, and that call ended, which was kind of surprising in hindsight. They usually try to keep you on the phone, and that resulted in a phone call back.
Hello, this is Kristen. Yeah. Kristen, your mother just called this operator. What's going on there? I already called 911 because I don't know what's going on. We're being harassed by cops. What officers are these, ma'am? I don't know. They claim to be officers. Nobody names their name. They try to keep me away from my cell phone. And I'm kicking them in the head. We don't even know him, but this is terrible. I left him. Why do you guys be out of him?
He was kicked in the head, he was kicked in the face, he was kicked in the groin. He had fractured ribs. And of course, the psychological aftermath was horrific.
Someone said, I believe it was Andrew Spangler, get my gun out the house. And the gun came, and I had somebody put it in my temple. And they told me, I'm the police, I could kill you, I could frame you, I'm the police, I could do whatever I want to do. Where's the badge? I said, I don't know where's the badge at, sir. If I had it, I would give it to you. I don't want to die over this.
Unlike now, today, where there would be video, there is no video. There were cell phones then, and so what we have is a recording from the scene of the women talking, particularly of Kirsten talking about what she sees in the street.
Who's beating the out of him right now? Pardon me? They're beating the out of him right now. Who's beating who? These so-called cops. Okay. Who are they beating? My friend.
And you can actually hear what transpires in the street off in the distance here on the cell phone.
Okay, officers are around your location. Listen to me. They're refusing to give any identification. That is correct. And they're beating the out of my son. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's probably 15 of them. About 15. That's correct. They're beating the out of my son. This is ridiculous.
Now he's handcuffed. Behind his back?
Yes. I observed Officer Bartlett stand up, take several steps back, and kick Frank Jude right in the head.
How many times?
3 or 4.
Although there were at least 15 officers involved in the beating of Frank Jude, the 3 defendants, Andrew Spangler, John Bartlett, and Daniel Masaryk, were identified as the ringleaders in the assault. A key piece of evidence in the state's case is a recording of the 911 call made by Kirsten Antonesen, and the jury listened intently as Antonesen relayed a real-time account of a vicious and targeted attack.
The cops are coming. They just warned each other that the cops are coming. So that's right.
What's the reference to a traffic stop, if you know?
That's what they were gonna say. We were driving and they pulled us over.
Is that?
And that we were there as a traffic stop.
Excuse me, I'm on the phone. You're on the phone for me. Hello? Hello? They're twisting my arm. Okay, hello?
What's happening at this point?
Michelle Bartlett had warned them that I was on the phone with a 911 operator.
Right.
And
Had you heard Michelle Bartlett say
Yes.
that? Who did she warn?
She warned the guys who were over by Frank. And then at that time, a guy had come up to me to try to get me off the phone.
Right. Your statement, they're twisting my arm. What was happening at that point?
A man had told me to get off the phone, and I didn't, and he took my left hand. I was talking on my right. He took my left hand, walked it behind my back, and pulled it up by my head, and told me to get off the phone again, and when I didn't, he reached around and hit the phone out of my hand. It went flying maybe 8 feet, and then it was gone.
And that ended the conversation?
Yes.
I was relieved when I saw the red and blue flashing lights at the end of the block. And I was hopeful that they would be coming quickly to see what was going on.
I couldn't identify anybody right away. It wasn't until I actually got closer is when I could identify.
Okay, so you went up and got closer. Where did
Yes.
Officer Schabel go?
He went directly right in front of me, and he went right to who I know now to be Frank Jude, right to Frank Jude's right side.
Did you hear anything that was said?
I heard somebody say, "Party can start. Now the party can start. Officer Schabel is here."
Did you at that time stand up and try to kick Mr. Jude in the head?
No.
Would you have any reason to do that?
No.
Have you any anger or dispute with Mr. Jude?
No.
Tell us what your observations were as to which one came up to Mr. Jude first.
Joseph Schabel did, and he was the one that kicked Mr. Jude in the head. I never saw Nicole Martinez around Mr. Jude.
The other thing that I think is really important to note here is at some point, the handcuffs are put on him, on Frank Jude. You're decentralized. And that was what the prosecutor, E. Michael McCann, that was what his point was, is that once the handcuffs go on, it stops.
What happened after the handcuffs? Was there any more physical blows, if you know?
Yes, somebody kicked me in the head. And it was so painful. It was so, I couldn't believe in my heart. Couldn't believe they were still hitting me.
Now he's handcuffed behind his back,
Yes.
and he's still lying on the ground.
Yes.
What do you see Defendant Bartlett do at that time?
I observed Officer Bartlett stand up, take several steps back, and kick Frank Jude right in the head.
How many times?
Well, 3 or 4.
At that time when he did that, did you hear any sounds?
Yes.
What kind of sounds did you hear?
Cracking type sounds.
Did you make any observations of what Defendant Masaryk did to Mr. Jude, if anything?
Yes. He grabbed Frank Jude's right pant leg, lifted his pant leg up and out, and then just started kicking him right in the crotch and in the butt.
Well, I thought the strongest witness was Martinez, frankly. Basically, that she saw blows being struck and violence rendered on Jude unequivocally. She was not, I thought she was straightforward. She came across as straightforward. I thought there it was. She laid it right out.
He's now handcuffed, is that correct?
That's correct. At that point, Mr. Bartlett came to my left side and stated, "Give me your pen," and removed my red pen from my shirt pocket.
During the course of the event, one of the officers took an object, a writing pen, and stuck it in his ears, and his ears were bleeding.
Frank Jude's fingers are pulled back to the point that they touch the back of his hand. Pens are jammed into both of his ears to the point that his eardrums bled for 2 weeks afterwards. And this goes on for minutes.
I hold my head like this and said, "Where's the at?" I just said, "I don't know where's the man at," and I have to put it all the way in my ear. All the way
Someone
out.
was holding your head, sir?
Yes, I hold my head like this, and after the pen went in and went out, and after that it switched.
This was a case where police officers were punishing somebody who was decentralized, who was not a threat to resist anymore.
Did you get an opportunity to observe him after he got up off the ground?
He was picked up by an on-duty officer.
And how did he appear? How did Mr. Jude appear?
His head was completely covered in blood. His pants were around his ankles, and he was cuffed.
What did you then do? You're taking Mr. Jude to your wagon, is that correct?
Yes.
And you put him in the wagon?
We put him in a wagon, and while he was under the light, I could see the extent of his injury. And I noticed how, swollen he looked. He wasn't bleeding profusely or anything like that, but he was very swollen, and there was blood on his face and head.
Did Officer Martinez make a statement?
Officer Martinez made the statement that, "I don't know these guys, and I'm not going down for them."
I'm not going down for them.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
Mike McCann would tell you that they were running into the blue wall, and we saw that on display. The officers involved, when there were multiple officers involved, they were all protecting each other. And it's sometimes called the blue wall, it's sometimes called the code of silence, but it's all of the same thing, that police don't tell or rat out other police officers.
You know what the rat squad is?
Yes,
Is that a term that's familiar to you?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Officers refer to IAD as the rat squad.
What's IAD?
Internal Affairs Division.
And in fact, you came back to the scene for the sole purpose of telling other people not to tell the detectives how that might have happened.
I came back to tell people that the union had been notified and that they were to wait until they had representation to make a statement.
And how did you do that?
I walked down the sidewalk and I told people that I had made a gesture like this, that I had called the union, and then I went like this.
Like this?
Yes.
Don't say anything to the detective.
Tell us what your feelings were about whether to sit down and share that with IAD.
I definitely didn't want to say everything that I saw.
Why didn't you want to say it?
Mostly for fear of retaliation from other department members.
There's a thing called the code of silence among police officers. You understand, police officers are sometimes faced with combat, and they depend on each other, protect each other. That creates a bonding, a strong bonding. That bonding now, when they see an officer do something unlawful, that tests that bonding. Do I forego the bonding that we've had as a fellow officer, or do I tell the truth about what happened?
There's been testimony here over the past week and a half as to pressure that's put on police officers not to give information when they witness other police officers using excessive force. Did you suffer any consequences in your job at the workplace because of that?
Unfortunately, yes, I did.
Would you explain to the jury what that was? There's a box of Kleenex there.
Sorry. I was repeatedly called a rat. When Officer Spangler and Bartlett and Miss Sarek were arrested, and their booking photos were copied and placed all over my locker with little hearts. I lost a lot of friends that, excuse me.
The citizens saw the kicking, but so many officers didn't. You have to wonder what's going on here. And if there's any place in the world, for gosh goodness sake, that there should be truth, it should be in a courtroom.
The blue wall of silence is a term used to describe an informal code among police officers that encourages them not to report a colleague's wrongdoing. In the Frank Jude case, many of the witnesses adhered to that code, and those who didn't paid a steep price for their perceived betrayal. Part of the jury's job in this trial would be to assess which witnesses to trust and which ones not to.
Who do you think Kirsten Antonesson is describing in that very chilling 911 tape when the on-duty officers are kicking and beating Mr. Jude now? Joseph Schabel.
Keep in mind in this, we have some of the really best defense lawyers in Milwaukee that they had. They really had the tops. And then McCann took the closing himself.
I've committed my life to the criminal justice system, my professional life. You have to wonder if the ratting seeps into the courthouse, if protecting your friends comes over integrity in the trial of a case.
The closing arguments were emotional. You know, it was an important case for the community, and I think McCann reflected that in his closing.
The citizens saw the kicking, but so many officers didn't. You have to wonder what's going on here. And if there's any place in the world, for gosh goodness sake, that there should be truth, it should be in a courtroom.
The fact that African-American individuals are the victims in this case, having something other than an all-white jury would probably have been better representative of the case.
This is a criminal case, not a civil case. Therefore, before you can return a verdict which may legally be received, such verdict must be reached unanimously.
So people understand it's a tough, challenging, difficult job. And when there's an issue of excessive use of force, there's always a presumption of innocence for the accused. But when it's an officer accused of excessive violence, the presumption is very strong.
And you reached the verdict, I understand, on 2 of the 3 defendants, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, 4 of the 5 charges.
4 of the 5 charges. There was 1 charge you did not reach a verdict.
Correct.
Okay. Could you hand the form to the bailiff, and I will read the verdict.
Judge Hancher was the judge, and I remember him receiving the verdict, looking at it. You know, there was a pause. It wasn't a real quick reading of the verdict.
First case is State of Wisconsin versus John Bartlett. We, the jury, find the defendant, John Bartlett, not guilty of second-degree recklessly endangering safety party to a crime as charged in count 1 of the information. As to count 2, the jury is deadlocked and did not fill out the form. We, the jury, find the defendant, Andrew Spengler, not guilty, charged in count 2 of the information. As to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. The 1 count, we, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Masaryk, not guilty of substantial battery, dated this 14th day of April, 2006.
I did not agree with that jury's verdict. As soon as the verdict came in, I contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office, Steve Biskupic, and urged him to open a federal case on this because I felt there'd been a miscarriage of justice.
One of the questions people had, like, well, how they were just acquitted? How could they? Well, they're different charges. They're civil rights violations, and ultimately, 8 police officers were charged. 4 of them pled guilty right away. Spengler, Masaryk, and Bartlett were convicted, and in that case, Packard was acquitted.
The question whether systemic racism exists or doesn't is the wrong debate to have. Unless and until we find systems untouched by and unpopulated by human beings, we will have systemic racism.
We can become this fist that can change those laws, that can make those 2 systems of justice different.
There has been progress, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. The court says, the law says, George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, an officer is required to act and to intervene. If he or she sees too much force being used by another, he or she got to act to intervene and has to report it immediately to a commander.
Frank wanted closure. He wanted it to be over with. He wanted some recognition that, yes, this was done to me and it was wrong, and you recognize that I was hurt.
I still get emotional thinking about that night. It's still something that affects me. And it brings tears to my eyes often. I don't know much about him. The little that I do know is he has struggled, and I think that it is fully justified.
In 2007, Andrew Spengler, John Bartlett, and Daniel Masaryk were all convicted of violating Frank Jude's civil rights. Spengler and Masaryk were both sentenced to 15 years and 8 months, while Bartlett was sentenced to 17 years and 4 months. The Frank Jude case also resulted in the largest mass firing of law enforcement personnel in the city's history. Frank Jude ended up settling a civil suit with the city of Milwaukee for $2 million. I'm Ashley Banfield. Thanks for watching.